Join us for the Criterion Institute podcast as Joy Anderson, a global thought leader in business and social change, leads us through a series of discussions, interviews, frameworks, rants, and reframes that will help you better understand how to use finance as a tool for transformative systems change.
I am Joy Anderson, and this is the Criterion Institute podcast. Today, I'm speaking with BE Alink, who is a stunning entrepreneur who I've been intersecting with and admiring. She founded Alinker, which is just an amazing company that's really about healthcare, although she sells adaptive bicycles. I bought one for my dad. That was a pretty incredible experience. So I got personal customer service from her in that one, but just a remarkable entrepreneur who's been a part of the Corliss or CEO community. I met her through Vicky Saunders years ago. Just a remarkable woman. And so what we talked about was that the words and the terms that we use can either bridge gaps or perpetuate division. Language in finance often obscures real issues and human experiences, such as inaccurately labeling our healthcare system, as we discuss, but consciously choosing words that reflect empathy and understanding rather than reinforcing systemic inequities. Through this, we can transform finance into a tool of inclusion and empowerment. Today, we'll explore how we move away from hierarchical, power-driven financial practices towards more compassionate, purpose-driven approaches that recognize humanity of all individuals involved. Join us as we reframe finance through the lens of kindness. We begin by talking about the power of language and how it can be used with kindness. We delve into the impact of diagnosis in healthcare and the financial systems surrounding that diagnosis moment. The concept of language as a lens is discussed, along with the importance of understanding and empathy, with a reflection on the relationship between empathy and competition. Finally, the conversation advocates for surrendering power over money and fostering more organic relationships. We truly covered the gamut in these conversations, and I hope you enjoy it. So picking up this conversation, always great to talk to you. Always great.
Likewise, Joy.
Yeah. You said this thing in an email to me, which was, how do we use language with kindness? What does that mean?
The invite there, I think, is to be aware of the language that we're using, be willing to understand what it represents, maybe to others differently than to you, to understand where it comes from, and with that, what it implies, and the awareness in how we use language, because I think offers the opportunity to be kind with language. Doesn't mean nice language necessarily, but kind with language, because I am aware of what I'm using, why I'm using it, and how I'm using it. Because I do believe that language, words, can be used as an expression of our soul or weaponized in a society where we're all being marketed to as customers to be more and more consumers of the most disgusting stuff. But that is weaponizing language. And I think it is an insult to language, what it can be as an expression of our soul if we use it as a weapon. And that's not kind. I think that's what I meant with that.
Can you give an example? of what would be different if it was being, if a word, maybe let's take like a, because words have power, right? So what's a powerful word? We could just unpack a word or a set of words.
Well, for example, and that's the example that always comes up with the whole environment of the Alinker, that three-wheeled walking bike that I created. Healthcare is a word. We use that freely. There's many words that come up. There's like, oh God, we can go into many rabbit holes. But let's start with healthcare. As long as we say healthcare, we assume that we have a system that is for our health. If you pick apart the system, what it is, it's reactive and only kicks in once we're sick. You could argue that it's more like a sick care system. We do need sick care systems because we do get sick. But as long as we say healthcare, we think we have a healthcare system that we might be able to improve, that we want to improve because it's actually inadequate for the demand at the moment. If you call it a sick care system, you can question how that needs to do, but then you can realize like, maybe we actually don't have a healthcare system that supports our wellness. That's what I mean with awareness around wording. We use the words democracy in a way and never check with each other. What do you mean with democracy? And what do I mean? Because we might have very, very different understandings. And so you talk on different levels. Then you get into arguments like, I don't agree with you, but we actually haven't checked with each other that what we talk about. And I think that can take a lot of stresses away if you actually are mindful about language.
And getting to what the meaning actually is, right? And what are we, so one of the things in healthcare that years ago, I spent about 3 years focused on the question of diagnosis in healthcare. And it reinforces your point, right? The power of a diagnosis in the financial systems of the healthcare system, right? Just for lack of a better word to call it. But that moment when you go from you're a human presenting with symptoms, looking for something from a doctor, and their search for a diagnosis that can be coded into a financial machine and then kick out. And then the language around that diagnosis that then opens up drugs and opens up other things means that, tying it, I mean, this is maybe not bigger than language, maybe it's how big language is in the world, right? But that the power of that diagnosis to then label, right? You're diabetic, you're disabled, you have back problems, you're ADHD, right? All of those become labels that are actually generated, not to be too cynical, but from a financial system that says, I need a label to be able to unlock more money than I had before. And it can't be that you're a holistic person who has lots of needs and let me explore with you how to find what those best needs are. It's, I have to find a coding in that, what's that medical book that has all the codes for all the stuff, right? I have to find the right code in that book that will unlock cash.
And the other thing about diagnosis, and especially women with MS, and especially Black women with MS, because the average time that it takes for a man to get a diagnosis for MS, or a woman or a Black woman to get MS, is very different because the system is kind of skewed and sexist. But so if you don't have a diagnosis, women generally are horrifically gaslit. Like, of course you're tired because you're a single mom, or oh, you're a little bit dramatic, like someone heard that because you're an actress. And all those symptoms that you come with before you have a diagnosis are often experiences of extreme gaslighting. Once you have the diagnosis, people say, I'm actually relieved that I have a diagnosis because now I'm validated, so to speak. And yes, so the power of words is, before the diagnosis, has an extreme consequence for the people that haven't had the diagnosis yet. And once you have the diagnosis, you're pushed into one channel and one channel only. And nobody's asking what you're eating or how much you're moving or what your poop looks like, for that matter, before they prescribe all sorts of, untested medication trials that you can be on. And please get used to the wheelchair. That's so on both sides. As a human being, you're gaslit.
It takes it back to what you named about sick care, right? That the turning point is when I find out how you're sick, not when I find out what you are when you're healthy. And a friend of mine, a guy named Gary Gunderson, years ago, maybe not that many years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, wrote a book called Leading Causes of Life. And he was actually trying to track what creates life versus what tracks you towards death. And there's so much of how we frame these different things that then lead us to different solutions, lead us to valuing and tracking and mobilizing different things. So maybe taking this and coming back to the power of language, one of the things that this is making me think of is we talk a lot about language, words, concepts that are lenses, right? Gender as a lens. Recently, we've been looking at what child as a lens is. Disability is also a complicated lens. And there's some new people, at least in our world, thinking about disability lens investing. I don't know if that's the right language, right? Because again, this is moments, particularly when we're using and you said democracy before, but we're using. I'm just joking here because I'm thinking to myself, you talked about like this as a window into the soul, and I'm going into my full analytical brain about how words lead to different paths of analysis. But they do, right? I'm going to do a gender analysis. I'm going to do a health analysis. I'm going to do a systemic analysis. Like, I'm going to analyze whether or not our democracy is falling apart. Built into that word democracy is, in some ways, a analytical framework. But to your point that you made before, it's not always clear to each other what we're actually analyzing, how we're analyzing it, what we're privileging. We just name these huge coded words. And I say I'm doing a gender analysis, and everybody else thinks I'm finding how many women-led entrepreneurs I can invest in.
Exactly. And you only need those analyses in a system that is inherently exclusive, excluding all sorts of people. Then you need a special lens for gender. You need a special lens for disabilities. If we live in a society where there's no one excluded, because we're all humans that deserve respect, what my grandma taught me, then you don't need those special lenses because people are actually not excluded. So all those things are a direct reaction to an economic model. I always say we don't live in a culture. It's a bit black and white, but just to make that clear, I don't think we live in a culture. We live in an economic model where male, female with children in a cornerstone of society now is a model, a profile that we can market to. Because we need to be consumers in a capitalistic system in order for the system to survive and to turn. So it's an economic model. Then anybody who doesn't fit in that cornerstone of society kind of model is disruptive. And so then we try to put a gender lens on or all that stuff. Well, the system is not interested in that because the system is actually quite sophisticated and quite well off. Like if you look at the whole food industry, that is predominantly owned by the same people that use the pharma industry. The food industry actually produces food that makes you sick. Currently, 60% of the North Americans has at least one diagnosed, to use that word, chronic illness. 60%, Joy. That's not diseases. That's a systemic thing of us being poisoned by food that holds carcinogens, carcinic
things that cause cancer. Let's just use the real word. Things that cause cancer.
Things that cause cancer. And for example, glyphosate is proven to cause cancer. The food lobby actually stopped the ban on glyphosates. that tells you enough and how, the food industry is not interested in feeding us nutrients, but feeding us shit that makes us sick. So we need the medication on the other side to try and fix it. Everything is always focused on the cure and not what actually supports us. Real food, boiled potatoes, for example, really good. And they're being stigmatized as, oh, potatoes are bad for you with all the starch. They're not. They're a very cheap and very healthy vegetable. So again, words.
Words. So let's go back to the words and say things like food, healthcare, disability, all of these, democracy, all of these different words that hold enormous power that, to your language, are in some ways embedded in an economic model. They are not separate from that. They are not some idealistic world over here that's separate from our material world. Okay, so here's my question. Words have power, but you started by saying that words could be a window into the soul, which feels hopeful to me. It feels like we're not in some evil, crass society that is going to doom and gloom and So what do we do about it? Like, if language is a challenge? You said we could have kind language. You said we could have language as a window into the soul. How do we do that?
By not focusing on those systems, taking note in awareness what those systems are and that those systems do not want to be fixed. What people are attracted to and what people miss at the moment is being acknowledged as human beings. We have created a whole society where people are not acknowledged and kicked to the curb. Acknowledging people in kindness with language. Like, I give you a weird example. To finish that sentence, I always think that fighting the system that doesn't want to be fixed, because it just is differently motivated. And when you see it for what it is, you can see why it's motivated by, selling medication instead of your health. And it's like, why would I engage with it? Because that system clearly is not interested in me and as a healthy person. So I'm going to create something where I can, in community with others, build my health practices that actually will support my wellness for me and my community. Now, I give you an example of what happens. A guy called me a year ago or something, madder than hell. And he was like, I don't want one of your bikes. I just want to say how disgusting I think it is that you're ripping off disabled people. And I was like, wow, do you want to tell me more about that? Because that must feel horrible to feel ripped off all the time. And he said, what are you saying? I said, well, clearly you've got a lot of experience in being ripped off. And I get that because this society is not very kind. And so do you want to share a little bit about that? And he was like, but I just attacked you. Are you not going to defend yourself? And I was like, I have nothing to defend. I hear that you're angry and I get that. I really understand that because in this society, when you're kicked in the curb and isolated and not acknowledged as a human being, you're going to be angry. We had a conversation for 1.5 hours and he was like, I still don't want one of your Alinkers because I actually don't need it. I just needed to vent something because I was fucking mad. And I was like, I get that. And he was like, well, thank you very much. This was a very nice conversation. But it's like that. If you're willing to show up for people and not have ego about stuff, I don't have anything to defend because I know that we're not ripping off disabled people. But I get it that people think that because they're ripped off left, right, center. And so using language as a way to connect with people, to understand, use it as a ways to bridge in empathy to the other soul, if you wish. Language can be an enormous bridge and open up a lot of doors.
I guess that's a beautiful story. It just, I don't know, I found the stress dropping out of me as you told that story. You sort of going from healthcare to, I guess my question is, for me, I wouldn't, and it doesn't, I don't know if it matters.
Yep.
But for me, that's about being in relationship and about being in a conversation. that's not the same thing for me as constructions of language, right? That's saying we can shift. Let me try a reframe in what you're saying, and you can tell me I'm dead wrong, and I would welcome that. But moving from sort of overburdened abstract concepts that mask reality, healthcare, food, right? Things that are masking truth. They're masking what's underlying. They're masking human experience. And if you change that from that abstract construction, you're not changing language. You're changing the mode of interaction. You're saying, instead of labeling, instead of putting categories, instead of something, it almost feels like an anti-language and in relationship.
But this is what I mean with when language is morphed into something where we weaponize language. I'll give you an example. Alok, there's this transgender person on Instagram. He said a while ago something that really resonated with me, and I was like, boom, that's so clear. He said, if I tell you who I am in this society where we weaponize words, you have to understand me. He said, but why do you have to understand me to love me? You do not need to understand me. But if you're in that whole construct of weaponizing language, I don't understand you, therefore I can dismiss you because I don't understand why you dress like that or whatever. Why do I need to understand you to still love you and show up for you? And this is where I mean the whole construct of weaponizing language with the whole mindset, like if I don't understand you, therefore I can dismiss you because I don't understand you. Understanding versus empathy.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, where you weaponize words and use it against you because I don't understand you and you're just a queer and you're just whatever language you want to use, to like, you're different than me. I can still love you or like you or, hang out with you or respect you at least. Can we just respect each other based on every human being deserves respect. Every living creature deserves respect. My grandma said every human being, but of course that's wider. And if we have a basic sense of that every living creature deserves respect, we don't need to understand each other with our heads in order to behave as kind
in
human
order
beings.
to be kind.
In order to be kind, yes. And I think it's not just a language; it's the expression of language in a weaponized system or in a system where the basis is like we all deserve respect, regardless what we look like. We are not some of our physical characteristics. We are who we choose to be.
I just want to reinforce your idea, this idea of the importance of my understanding. Because I've written about this, I've talked about this a bunch, exactly the way you said it, which is, or at least how I hear it, which is empathy is often described as understanding the experience of others. And I think that's such a crap definition because understanding becomes about me and whether or not I understand, not about you. And so ironically, the thing that's supposed to bring us more together gives me an automatic excuse to other you because it's about whether or not I understand. Why is it about whether or not I understand? I just need to know that it's important to you. And if it's important to you,
and you don't harm any other people with it, why would I care?
Exactly.
But this is based in a system that weaponizes language in order to divide us because it thrives when we are divided. If we don't have war somewhere, our economy doesn't work. If we don't divide people here, we can't make some people rich. That's the system that we live in. If we don't
compete, I won't win.
Exactly. That's that whole market capitalistic system that we live in, which thrives on division. And that's embedded in all the language that we're using. So to be aware of what the language that we're using is representing, to either build a bridge or be empathetic to somebody, not necessarily understanding them. I don't need to understand you, Joy. I can still love you.
Exactly. Well, let's end on that then.
Beautiful.
We spend a lot of time thinking in finance about flows of money and capital and velocity and all kinds of words that are complicated and difficult. And in the end, finance is about facilitating the movement of capital. You have this beautiful story, though, about a different way to think about that.
Yes, I can share that little story, but it started with a friend of mine back in France, who was a multimillionaire, who had funded one of my projects in Kenya, and he told me one day, and this is now decades ago, but that has changed my way of looking at money. He said, if you look at the globe, and all continents are the organs of the body, he said some organs are hemorrhaged and some organs are in drought, and he said both of them are sick. That gave me the concept whereby, now I'll tell you the story of that you were talking about. When I was raising funds for the Alinker, and I always like to think of money as nutrients that need to flow between the hemorrhaged and the drought continents and people and organizations and whatever. But so I use this story sometimes when I talk to investors, when they give me the time, more than a 90-second elevator pitch, so to speak, because I don't do those anymore. It's like, fuck it, if you only give me 90 seconds, I'm not doing that anymore. You either make time.
So above that, my friend.
I know.
You are so past that.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know that Instagram account, it's called Humans of New York. It's on Instagram, and every day there's I believe it's a guy who makes a portrait of a person, houseless person, somebody on the street in New York, with a little bio. And they're beautiful profiles, beautiful little stories, insights into where people come from that walk in the streets of New York. And one day, it's a few years ago now, one day he meets this woman. She's like early 70s, black woman, and somehow he gets fascinated by her. And he starts talking. He said, can I interview? And she was like, yeah, sure. Turns out she was a burlesque dancer way back in the time. First black burlesque dancer in New York back in the 30s or whatever that was. And has this incredible life of travel and all this weird stuff that she's done, and like he gets completely fascinated and interviews her and was like, I'm going to post a series about her or something. He didn't quite know what he was going to do. And then one day she falls and breaks all sorts of bones. Of course, as a woman on the street, she doesn't have the medical insurance and nothing. But he's in a relationship with her, so he cannot just walk away. He's fascinated by her and he cares for her. So he's like, shit, what do I do? So what he does is he starts a GoFundMe campaign to cover her medical bills. And simultaneously, he starts posting the whole series on Instagram about her life. I can't remember exactly how much the campaign raised, but it was well over $2 million, I think, way beyond what she needed for the medical bills and a wheelchair or something. And I'm always using that story because once she got better and her bones were healed and she had a good wheelchair to get around in and all that, she manifested her dream with that money, which was an orphanage that she already volunteered in. She started funding the orphanage now. What that did, this whole movement, there was this one woman who had a great story. It's a great mind, a great spirit in, wanting to give, she already did that. She didn't have anything for herself, but she was already giving to the orphans in the home. What this did is that people who have money, a lot of money to give, they need to be connected to something that makes them feel good. Purpose. Purpose makes you feel good. If there's a purpose or something, that makes you really feel good. If you just have hemorrhaged money, deep down you know that you got that money not because you deserved it, but because the systems allowed you to accumulate that much more than you need. Especially the people with a lot of money, they are probably very big in need of purpose. Now, purpose, me for example, as a starting business a few years ago, I needed nutrients. And it was really hard to get those nutrients. But her broken body, with the nutrients of the community that needed purpose, not only repaired her body and got her back up and running, but funded this whole orphanage. Plus everybody who gave the money felt incredibly good about what they are part of now. And I think that if we can combine, mix, bridge purpose with finance, no power over. Because I had a lot of investors tell me like, yeah, but you need to do this. And I was like, if you're going to tell me what to do, then I'm not going to take your money. You invest because you believe in me and what I've done so far. If you're not investing in that, I don't want you. I don't want your power over me. So bringing purpose and nutrients together in a way that you're understanding, feeling that you're both getting better of this. You're getting something out of it. That is the essence, I think, where money can be extremely powerful. It's not the money that is the problem. It's how we see money and how we combine money with having power over. Financial institutions, investors have power over the people that create purpose. Just surrender your money because we're actually going to make you feel good. You accumulated way more than you needed in a system that allowed you to do that. Surrender power over your money. Give me the fucking nutrients and I will change the world. Not that the world needs changing, but I will do more of what makes a lot of people happy and seen and acknowledged in this world. So surrender power.
You will do your part, and more than most individuals, you have done your part. And I think what's so cool about the story and your own experience of attracting investment is to really move it from a hierarchical relationship to a more organic, an organism, something that is intrinsically codependent and reliant on each other, as opposed to all in service of one or the other. Really beautiful story. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
To learn more about our work, visit us at criterioninstitute.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help our podcast reach a wider audience. Thanks for listening.